Miss Collier explains.
Equivalent fractions.
Our learning intention is to understand what is meant for two fractions to be equivalent and to be able to simplify fractions by dividing by the highest common factor. We will know we are successful when we can decide if two fractions are equivalent and we can write fractions in their simplest form. Fractions! I'm sure that you can agree with me that fractions are everywhere, and I know you've probably been doing them for years now, but we're going to continue to build on our knowledge and understanding of fractions. Quickly, let's do a recap. We know that fraction represents a part of a whole. And here I've just got some quick examples of things that we see in everyday life that have fractions. However, during this unit, we're going to look at some more in-depth ways that fractions are used in all different areas of life. Here I have a radiographer, and they diagnose medical conditions using body imaging such as X-rays and CT scans, MRI scans, and ultrasounds. They have to analyze the energy wave scatter fractions and how these fractions change with an illness. This is just one of the many ways that fractions are used in everyday lives and jobs that you might consider in the future. We'll look at so many more across the term. Another quick recap. We know that the number that sits at the top of a fraction is called a numerator, and the number at the bottom is called the denominator. The little line in the middle is called the vinculum. If we think about a fraction in terms of a pizza, the denominator is how much it's been cut up into. The numerator is how much of that we have. So in this case, my pizza is cut up into two pieces, and I have one of them. The vinculum can also be thought of as a division symbol. We're going to look at equivalent fractions. Now, in the word equivalent, we can see this equi, which means equal to each other. So fractions that are equal to each other. So often fractions may look different when in fact they're actually representing the same number. If I think of an example like an AFL football match or another sporting match, if they say that we've got to the end of the first half or the end of the second quarter, they're actually saying the same thing. So if I think of half and second quarter, they're both representing the same information. And in my sporting match, they're both representing the same amount of time has been completed. Let's think of a pizza party, because I love pizza. Now, at this pizza party, a group of friends are sleeping over and they're making homemade pizzas, which means every person can cut up the pizza however they like. Trevor cuts it into 2 pieces. Jackie cuts it up into 4. Talia into 6. And Jared does the standard 8 pieces. While they're watching their first movie, they're eating a bunch of pizza. At the end of the movie, this is what they look like. We can see that all of them have eaten the same amount of pizza, but Trevor has 1/2 left, Jackie has 2/4 left, Talia has 3/6, and Jared has 4/8. But we can see that all of these fractions are representing the same amount. There's just one more thing that I want to show you, and it may seem kind of obvious, but it's going to help us later. If I have a pizza and it's cut up into 2 pieces, but I have both pieces, that's 2/2. But it's a whole, right? I've got the whole pizza. This one's cut up into 5/5. I've still got the whole. And this is 3/3. I've still got the whole. So all of these fractions actually represent the number 1. And this is going to be really useful to us later, because if we multiply anything by the number 1, it stays the same. So this means that we can use it to change a fraction's look without changing its value. Okay, so what we know so far is equivalent fractions are fractions that represent the same value. Equivalent fractions are produced by multiplying the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So as I said, when we divide by the same number, we're actually creating a simpler fraction. Simplifying fractions involves writing a fraction in its simplest form or its easiest form. Okay, having really large numbers in your fractions can be confusing to try and visualize it. So we always make our fractions as simple as possible. To do this, the numerator and denominator must be divided by the highest common factor between those two numbers. As I said, it's a mathematical convention that you always write fractions in its simplest form. So anytime you ever have to write a fraction, you should say, can I simplify this? And today we're going to look at how we simplify. All right, first up, let's look at creating equivalent fractions. So an equivalent fraction is any time we've multiplied the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So here it says write 4 equivalent fractions. So in this case, there's no really right answer. I've just got to times by the same number 4 times. So firstly, I'm going to pick my favorite number, 7. And 2 times 7 is 14. And 3 times 7 is 21. So that is an equivalent fraction. All right, I'm going to do another one. I'm going to times by 3. And 2 times 3 is 6. And 3 times 3 is 9. So that's equal to each other. It's representing the same value. 2 times 3, I'm going to do 5. 2 times 5 is 10. And 3 times 5 is 15. Lastly, I'm going to do 1 million. And that's going to be 2 million and 3 million. So that's all equivalent fractions, all 4 of these, well actually 5, because they're all representing the same part of a whole. You try coming up with some. Now obviously your answers can vary, so try getting someone else to check that they are equivalent. Okay, sometimes we can be given fractions and we have to know whether or not they're equivalent. So we're going to learn how to check for equivalence. So we either have to write an equals or a does not equal between the fractions, stating whether or not they are equivalent. Okay, I have 1/3 and 3/7. It is really hard to compare these fractions because our pizzas have been cut up into different sizes. So what we want to do is make the denominators the same. To do this, we are going to have to find the lowest common multiple. So we always start at the bottom, multiples. What are the multiples of 3 and 7? I just write out a couple. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. And we got 7, 14, 21, 28, 35. All right, next step is to find, so we've done the multiples. Now we have to find common, ones that are the same. Well, we only have 21. And then if you have more, you have to figure out which one's the lowest, but we only have 1. What this does is tell you what your new denominator is going to be. Our denominator is going to be 21. Then you have to think, how do I get from 3 to 21? Well, I'm multiplying by 7. And whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top, because we know we want to multiply by a 1. And 7 times 1 is 7. Now here, how did I get from 7 to 21? That's times by 3. And I want to do that on the top and the bottom. And 3 times 3 is 9. Now that I have the same denominator and my pizza is cut up into the same size pieces, I can easily see if they're equivalent. One has 7, one has 9, which means they are not equal to each other. B. I have 4/5 and 20 25ths. It's always a good idea to write out the multiples for the larger number first, because if you spot one that you know works for the other number, then you can stop, because I know that this number right here is going to work for the 5. So I'm going to do 25 and 25. So to get from 5 to 25, I'm going to have to multiply by 5. And 4 times 5 is 20. Now to get from 25 to 25, don't have to do anything. And now that I have the same denominator, I can compare them. They're both 20, which means they are equal. All right, you have a turn trying to figure out if these fractions are equivalent. Let's quickly check these answers. All right, I know my lowest common multiple is going to be 20, and 5 to 20 is times by 4. And so then they're both 8, and therefore they are equivalent to each other. Here, 4 over 10 and 16 over 30. Well, my lowest is actually going to be 30. And to get from 10 to 30 is times by 3. So 4 times 3 is 12. And 12 and 16 are the same. So these are not. Next, we have highest common factors, which is a bit of a recap because we have done it in order to simplify things in the past. But what we can remember is factors are numbers that can go inside of the other number. So for 6, that's 1 can fit in it, 2, 3, and 6. And for 24, it's 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. So those are all the factors. So step 1 is to write out the factors. Next, we circle ones that they have in common. 1, 2, 3, and 6. All right, and lastly, we want the one that's highest because that's going to get it the most simplest, which is 6. So in this case, we would divide by 6. And 6 divided by 6 is 1. And 24 divided by 6 is 4. So we've simplified that fraction down to 1/4 by finding the highest common factor. So let's use it to do the simplest form. So we're going to figure out how we can divide this down. So for 12, I've got 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Well, I know that 12 does not go in, 6 does not go in, 4 does go in. So I'm going to divide by 4. And 12 divided by 4 is 3. And 20 divided by 4 is 5. So I've made it simpler there. Now we've got 7 and 42. Now I know that 7 goes into 42, which means I can divide them both by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. And 42 divided by 7 is 6. So I've converted it down there to 1/6 into its simplest form. Now remember, we always have to do the simplest form, so this is something we should know very well. You have a go. Let's quickly check these. The highest common factor here is 4, and 16 divided by 4 equals 4, and 20 divided by 4 equals 5. For this one, the highest common factor is actually 14. 14 divided by 14 is 1, and 56 divided by 14 is 4. If that one was a bit harder and you didn't write out all of your factors, what you can do is, you see they're both even, so you don't have to always do the highest, it just makes it one step. In this situation, I could divide them both by 2, because I saw they're both even, and then it would give me 7 and 28. And then I could figure out my next step, and I could divide them both by 7, because then I can see, oh, that's quite easy to put the 7 in, and that would give me 1/4. So you can do it in multiple steps. I hope now you know the steps for figuring out if two fractions are equivalent, and the steps for simplifying fractions, because you must always do that.